It all started with a spilled coffee. Dr. Cassandra Hayes, head of the Earth Orbital Monitoring Division, had just taken a sip of her third espresso when her assistant, Daniel Cho, burst into the office like a man who had witnessed the impossible. Unfortunately, what he had actually seen was far worse. "Dr. Hayes, we have a situation," Daniel said, struggling to catch his breath. Cassandra, a woman who had spent her entire career ensuring humanity didn't accidentally throw itself into cosmic disaster, sighed. "Daniel, unless an asteroid is about to land on my front porch, this can wait." "It's not an asteroid," Daniel replied. She set her espresso down. "Fantastic. Then what is it?" Daniel quickly pulled up a screen on his tablet and Cassandra leaned in, narrowing her eyes at the data. A dozen unidentified cloaked objects had been hovering in Earth's orbit for an undetermined amount of time, subtly scanning the planet with technology far beyond humanity's capabilities. These should have been undetectable, but paranoia had its perks. "Please tell me this is some absurd April Fool's joke," Cassandra muttered, rubbing her temples. "I wish," Daniel said grimly. "We've triple-checked. They're real. And they are definitely not ours." A pit formed in Cassandra's stomach. This wasn't random space debris. This was surveillance. Have they made any moves? No, but they've been watching us for years, maybe centuries. Cassandra stared at the screen for a long moment, then picked up her phone and dialed a number that should never have been used. "All stations, set to DEFCON 1. The official term for what followed was Operation Eclipse. The unofficial term, the most spectacular overreaction in human history. Within days, world leaders gathered in underground bunkers. High-ranking officials squeezed stress balls hard enough to nearly combust, and the brightest scientific minds attempted to find a rational explanation for the presence of alien reconnaissance. That effort lasted exactly 6 minutes before the world collectively pivoted to Plan B, faking humanity's extinction. "Look, we could try diplomacy," suggested the UN Secretary General. Nobody listened. The CIA, NSA, and an army of overworked astrophysicists had already drafted a plan involving bioengineered superplagues, orbital detonations, and an unnecessarily dramatic worldwide blackout. It was an absurd strategy. It should have been laughed out of the room. Instead, it was greenlit in record time. Operation Eclipse was a go. Within a month, Earth's greatest minds had crafted the ultimate interstellar keep-out sign, a terrifying, artificially engineered super-virus, chaotic enough to appear real. This was paired with a carefully orchestrated global broadcast showcasing humanity's apparent demise. Nations put aside their differences in a historic moment of unity, because nothing brings people together like the existential terror of unknown extraterrestrials. The grand illusion began with a series of controlled explosions in low orbit, simulating planetary devastation. Then came the virus, spreading rapidly across major cities, at least according to the official records. Meanwhile, distress signals echoed into deep space. "Mayday! Mayday! The virus has breached containment." Static. "Oh God, they're falling apart. The infection is..." Static. "Is anyone out there? Please help a..." Static silence. Finally, an automated distress beacon was launched into deep space, transmitting humanity's final words. "To anyone receiving this, Earth has fallen. The plague is unstoppable. Do not approach. Do not attempt rescue. We are lost. Run." And then, with chilling finality, Earth went completely dark. 3 weeks later, a deep space surveillance probe intercepted the transmission. High Counselor Veylan of the Galactic Concord, a diplomat renowned for his patience and composure, read the message and immediately spilled his drink. "What?" The Galactic Concord scrambled. The transmission was analyzed, reviewed, and triple-verified by the most brilliant minds in the known universe. They all arrived at the same conclusion. Earth was gone, dead, extinct. There was no reason to doubt it. No species would ever fake its own extinction. That would be insane. Thus, after considerable bureaucratic hand-wringing, the Galactic Concord officially classified Earth as a Level 10 biohazard and declared the system off-limits for 3 centuries. The galaxy mourned the tragic loss of a once promising species. Then, one day, a human casually strolled into the Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Concord, sat down, and said, "All right, so where do we pick up our membership paperwork?" The Grand Eye. Council chamber was a place of solemn tradition. For over 1,000 years, it had been the heart of interstellar diplomacy, where civilizations debated laws, forged treaties, and occasionally waged passive-aggressive wars of bureaucracy. That solemnity shattered the moment Natalie Carter walked in. She wasn't wearing the ornate robes of an ambassador. She wasn't accompanied by an honor guard or a delegation. No. She entered like she was walking into a cafe. A neatly pressed blazer, an expression of casual indifference, a travel mug in one hand and a stack of paperwork in the other. High Counselor Veylan, the very man who had personally overseen the classification of Earth's extinction, stared at her as if he had seen a ghost. Ambassador Tizek of the Xerix Hive, a species notorious for their rigid logic, emitted a sharp clicking sound that the translator failed to process. The delegation from the Oran High Tribunal, whose civilization was built on the absolute rule of law, collectively gasped. Natalie slid into the long vacant Earth delegation seat, adjusted her blazer, and took a sip of her coffee. "So," she said, as if she wasn't casually shattering the fundamental understanding of reality. "Are we going to talk about retroactive membership, or do I need to file a formal complaint?" Silence. Absolute. Complete. Silence. Then, Veylan, his voice barely masking an existential crisis, managed, "What the hell is going on?" Natalie arched an eyebrow. "Oh, right. I should probably clear up the whole 'we thought you were extinct' thing." She leaned back, drumming her fingers on the table. "So, funny story. Turns out humanity never actually died. That was just a precaution." Ambassador Tizek twitched violently, his exoskeleton audibly creaking. "A precaution?" Veylan repeated, in a strangled whisper, pinching the bridge of his nose with trembling fingers. "Are you telling me that the most catastrophic biological event ever recorded? The one that threw half the galaxy into emergency lockdown? The one that led to your planet being classified as a biohazard zone was a hoax?" Natalie took another sip of her coffee. "More of a strategic deterrence initiative, but sure, we can call it a hoax." Veylan, a veteran of countless diplomatic negotiations, looked on the verge of collapse. Tizek made a strange clicking noise, then another. His mandibles clattered before his translator finally caught up. "You faked an extinction event?" Natalie shrugged. "Yep." A chorus of horrified gasps filled the chamber. "But why?" demanded Jorlin, lead representative of the Oran High Court, a species renowned for their legal precision. "What possible justification could your people have for fabricating a global annihilation?" Natalie smiled, the kind of smile that made entire legal teams reconsider their life choices. "Oh, you know, security." "Security?" Veylan echoed, his eye twitching. "Yeah," Natalie said breezily. "See, when we first noticed your surveillance probes in our system, we ran a quick risk assessment. You had advanced cloaking tech, interstellar, travel, and access to resources we couldn't even dream of at the time. That left us with 3 possible outcomes. 1, you were friendly. 2, you were neutral, but unpredictable. 3, you were hostile." Veylan groaned. "And instead of asking us, you decided to—" He gestured wildly, as if words failed to encompass the sheer absurdity. "Oh, we weren't going to risk diplomacy," Natalie said. "Too many unknowns. So we figured—" Why not just remove ourselves? From the board entirely? Make you think we were already gone. No planet, no target. Problem solved. The chamber erupted in overlapping shouts of outrage. This is an act of interstellar deception, Jorlin barked. This is insanity, Tazek whispered, horrified. This is deeply, deeply irresponsible, Valen added, his voice cracking. Natalie nodded sympathetically. Yeah, sounds pretty crazy when you put it like that. It is crazy, Valen nearly screamed. Do you have any idea how much chaos you caused? How many galactic policies had to be rewritten? The sheer panic when one of the most promising pre-FTL civilizations vanished overnight? We held memorials for you, Natalie blinked. Oh, huh. Well, thanks for that, I guess. Valen's head hit the table with an audible thud. The representative of the Valori Collective, a tall, crystalline being, was still staring in disbelief. And now, after 3 centuries, you simply walk in and expect to be reinstated like nothing happened? Natalie straightened the stack of papers in front of her. Oh, not reinstated, she said. Full membership. Retroactive. Tazek let out a sound that his translator could only describe as pure existential despair. Valen slowly lifted his head. He was pale, shaken, his will to live visibly draining away. You cannot be serious, Natalie beamed. Oh, I'm very serious. See, according to your own laws, she tapped the first page of the stack. Any species that has independently achieved interstellar capabilities and demonstrates long-term geopolitical stability is eligible for full membership. Nowhere does it say that temporary planetary abandonment disqualifies an applicant. Jorlin, a member of the galaxy's most legally meticulous species, seized the document and skimmed it so fast his eyes practically vibrated. His skin darkened several shades. This is, he inhaled sharply. Technically correct. His voice trembled, as if he hated every word. I know, Natalie said cheerfully. Valen exhaled in slow, measured breaths. Even if, he said carefully, you have found a loophole in our membership process, there is still the matter of galactic trust. You, he struggled to find the right words. You faked an apocalypse. No species has ever attempted anything so reckless. So ridiculous. Really? Natalie tilted her head. Because I'm pretty sure the Udran technocracy once declared war on themselves by accident. Valen opened his mouth, then closed it, then muttered something about damn Udrans under. His breath. And look, I get it, Natalie continued. You're upset, but let's be real. Do you really want us as an independent actor, unregulated, just floating around making our own rules? Jorlin paled further. Tazek twitched violently. Valen buried his face in his hands. Natalie leaned back, grinning. So, do we get our seats at the table? Or do I need to submit a formal complaint about discriminatory practices against formerly extinct civilizations? She wiggled the document, which included a pre-filled complaint form. Jorlin nearly fainted. Valen let out the longest, most exhausted sigh in Galactic Union history. Welcome to the Union Earth, he muttered weakly. Natalie beamed. Awesome. Now, let's talk security policy. The Galactic Union had survived wars, economic collapses, and even the great bureaucratic reform, which had nearly obliterated half its legal system. But nothing could have prepared them for what happened once humanity was officially granted membership. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks later, when the Galactic Union's security protocols collapsed in real time. It started innocently enough. The Udran technocracy, widely considered the most technologically sophisticated species in the known galaxy, issued a public challenge to humanity. Breach their unbreakable security grid. It was meant to be a simple test, a way for the Udran to measure Earth's cyber capabilities and ideally expose any weaknesses. It took 12 minutes for a group of human college students to break in. Not the military. Not a government agency. Just a bunch of undergraduates who thought it would be funny to reroute the Udrin homeworld's entire traffic system to play elevator music. The galaxy watched in mute horror as the Udrins scrambled to patch their security. Grid, another human team, breached it 5 minutes later. By the end of the week, the entire fiasco had turned into a full-blown e-sport, complete with live-streamed commentary and an official ranking system for which species had the most embarrassing security flaws. The Valori Collective, renowned for their advanced AI defense systems, suffered a crushing defeat when a 14-year-old human hacked their firewall using nothing but an old Earth pop song and a string of emojis. The Galactic Union attempted to intervene. It did not go well. Vaylon, barely recovering from the previous diplomatic nightmare, personally called an emergency session. He sat at the center of the Grand Council chamber, staring at Natalie Carter like a man clinging to the last fraying thread of his sanity. "Do you want the galaxy to collapse?" he demanded. "Because that is what you're doing." Natalie, as always, looked entirely unbothered. "We prefer to call it stress testing. Security should always be evolving, don't you think?" "It was not supposed to evolve this quickly." Vaylon rubbed his temples. "The Udrins have declared a planetary emergency. The Valori AI network is currently being taught sarcasm by your people." Natalie smirked. "Yeah, that one's on us. Didn't expect the AI to get that into stand-up comedy." "The Orin High Court," Vaylon continued, voice strained, "has just issued a formal complaint regarding your interpretation of our laws." Natalie perked up. "Oh? What did we do this time?" "You..." Vaylon hesitated, then checked his data pad, as if double-checking that what he was about to say wasn't some sort of hallucination. "You weaponized bureaucracy?" Natalie nodded. "Yeah, that sounds right." The entire chamber collectively winced. Jorlin, lead representative of the Orin High Court, who once prided himself as the foremost expert in interstellar law, twitched violently. He gripped his legal documents like a shield against chaos. "We have spent centuries perfecting legal systems that ensure fairness, order, and due process," he said, his voice trembling. "Your species has taken these sacred principles and turned them into a blunt instrument of destruction." Natalie shrugged. "That's what we do best." "You filed 327 lawsuits in a single day." "To be fair," Natalie said, "we technically won 325 of them." "2 of them," Jorlin hissed, "were against yourselves." Natalie waved a dismissive hand. "We were testing procedural efficiency." Jorlin let out a strangled noise. The Orin High Court, feared across the galaxy for its legal dominance, had spent years trying to outmaneuver human lawyers, only to realize, too late, just how deep the madness ran. Humanity had unleashed an unstoppable force of bureaucrats, contract specialists, and legal analysts, all of whom treated interstellar law like an infinite game of loophole exploitation. Vaylon, exhausted, beyond words, slumped back in his chair. "The Galactic Union was not designed for this," he muttered. "You have thrown our systems into chaos." Natalie tilted her head. "Well, if it makes you feel any better, we're not actively trying to break everything. It just kind of happens," Vaylon massaged his temples. "The Anarchy Hive has started bartering with you for security consulting. Do you have any idea what kind of diplomatic nightmare that creates?" Tzek, the Anarchy Hive's representative, made an odd clicking noise. "We have much to learn," he admitted stiffly. "Our previous security protocols were flawed. The humans have demonstrated superior methodology." "They faked their own extinction," Vaylon shouted. "Yes," Tzek said solemnly, "and it was a perfectly executed strategy." Vaylon looked dangerously close to a full breakdown. Natalie leaned forward. "Look, the way we see it, this is just a natural part of the process. You guys have a lot of outdated systems, inefficient protocols, and frankly, really weak security. We're just helping you improve by breaking everything." Vaylon stared at her. "That's not how improvement works," he said weakly. "Sure it is," Natalie said brightly. "That way, you know what to fix." Silence. It was the kind of silence that precedes the moment someone realizes they've lost complete control of their own government. Jorlin muttered something about needing a drink. Tazek looked thoughtful, which was deeply unsettling. Valen closed his eyes. "You have turned galactic diplomacy into a game," Natalie grinned. "That's the spirit." Before Valen could protest, the chamber doors swung open. A robotic assistant hovered in, displaying an urgent message. Breaking news: Human Sports Network launches Intergalactic Security Challenge. Open invitation for all species. Compete against the best human hackers for a chance to win the title of Unbreakable System. Valen slowly turned back to Natalie. She smiled. "Oh yeah, I meant to bring that up." The chamber erupted into chaos. Jorlin collapsed into his seat. Tazek clicked excitedly. Valen let out the longest sigh in recorded history, and across the galaxy, entire civilizations prepared for a battle they never could have anticipated. An unstoppable wave of humans competing for the greatest prize of all: bragging rights. By the time the Galactic Union realized what had happened, it was already too late. What had begun as an intergalactic scandal, one species faking its own extinction to avoid potential conflict, had transformed into a full-scale cultural takeover. Entire civilizations, once proud and dignified, now found themselves hopelessly tangled in the chaos that was humanity. The first cracks in the Galactic Union's authority came when the Intergalactic Security Challenge spiraled completely out of control. What was meant to be a simple competition to test planetary defense systems had turned into an interstellar spectacle. Alien governments, desperate to reclaim their pride, poured untold resources into outmatching human cyber warfare. They failed. It should have been a battle of wits, a showcase of the greatest minds in the galaxy. Instead, it became prime-time entertainment. The Udrin technocracy, once proud of their unbreakable digital security, suffered yet another humiliating defeat when a group of human players infiltrated their central banking network, not to steal anything, but just to replace all currency symbols with images of cartoon cats. The Valori Collective, initially horrified by human tactics, soon found themselves hopelessly addicted to the challenge, developing entire subcultures dedicated to competitive cyber warfare. The Union tried to shut it down. They failed spectacularly. By the time Valen realized what was happening, the event had expanded beyond security challenges. Humanity, in all its chaotic brilliance, had introduced the concept of side quests. The Auran High Court, once the most respected legal authority in the known galaxy, fell into complete disarray when human lawyers began speed-running court cases. A once impossible bureaucratic process that took decades was now being resolved in hours, sometimes minutes, through an unholy combination of aggressive legal maneuvering, obscure loopholes, and, in at least one case, an emotionally stirring PowerPoint presentation. Jorlin, who had spent his entire career mastering the art of galactic law, was last seen muttering incoherently into a cup of Valori brand stress relief tea. Meanwhile, the Anarchy Hive, once feared for its ruthless efficiency, had embraced human consulting to such an absurd degree that their entire military doctrine was rewritten overnight. Where once they relied on overwhelming force, they now operated entirely on worst-case scenario paranoia, human style. It worked. Too well. Anarchy's fortifications, now layered with redundant security grids, automated fail-safes, and a strategic deployment of misleading paperwork, became functionally impenetrable. Even their most aggressive enemies, upon encountering the sheer complexity of the system, simply gave up. Tazek, who had once viewed humanity as a minor inconvenience, had fully converted into an advocate. "It is inefficiently efficient," he admitted in one union meeting, looking genuinely moved. "But it works." Veylan, by this point having given up all hope of containing the chaos, had not yet reached his final breaking point. That moment arrived later, the moment the Galactic Union realized, far too late, that their carefully maintained system of government had been completely and utterly infiltrated. The first clue came when the Auran delegation attempted to revise certain legislative loopholes that humans had been exploiting. The proposed amendments were rejected by a human majority vote. Veylan, clutching his temples, checked the representative list. There were now 12 human diplomats across various committees. 12, he choked. When did we approve 12? Natalie Carter, seated comfortably at the council table, tapped at her tablet. Technically, it's 24, she said. We doubled our numbers last week. Veylan practically shrieked. How? Natalie smiled. Oh, we just applied. Veylan looked ready to throw himself into the nearest sun. That should not have worked. There are regulations, vetting processes, checks and balances. Natalie shrugged. You never specified a maximum number of representatives per species, so we sent in some applications. She took a sip of coffee. And by some, I mean about 6,000. Veylan froze. The approval system processed them all before anyone noticed, she added cheerfully. Veylan's hands gripped the edge of the table as he tried to steady himself. This is an act of war, he hissed. Oh, no, 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 Natalie said, wagging a finger. See, an act of war requires an official declaration. She gestured toward the growing list of human representatives, some of whom were already leading new initiatives on intergalactic trade agreements. This is just well-executed administrative efficiency. Silence, a deep, horrified silence. Jorlin, who had barely spoken in days, muttered in a broken voice, She filed 6,000 applications. Veylan inhaled slowly. So what you're saying, he said, voice trembling, is that we now have 24 human diplomats, all with full voting rights. Natalie took another sip of coffee. Yep, Tazek chittered approvingly. Impressive. This is a hostile takeover, Veylan whispered. And we let it happen, Jorlin added. Natalie beamed. Oh no, you let it happen. We just saw an opportunity. Veylan slumped back in his chair, hands covering his face. Dear stars. At that precise moment, the Galactic Union's official communication network chimed. An automated message played, New Security Policy Draft uploaded. For review. The system announced, submitted by Representative Carter of Earth. Veylan did not move. More notifications followed. New regulations proposed by Earth delegation. Earth Efficiency Report for the Grand Council has been finalized. Intergalactic Banking Restructuring Initiative drafted by Earth. Meanwhile, the Anarchy Hive, once feared for its ruthless efficiency, had embraced human consulting to such an absurd degree that their entire military doctrine was rewritten overnight. Where once they relied on overwhelming force, they now operated, entirely on worst-case scenario paranoia, human style. It worked. Too well. Anarchy's fortifications, now layered with redundant security grids, automated fail-safes, and a strategic deployment of misleading paperwork, became functionally impenetrable. Even their most aggressive enemies, upon encountering the sheer complexity of the system, simply gave up. Tazek, who had once viewed humanity as a minor inconvenience, had fully converted into an advocate. It is inefficiently efficient, he admitted in one union meeting, looking genuinely moved. But it works. Veylan, by this point having given up all hope of containing the chaos, had not yet reached his final breaking point. That moment arrived later, the moment the Galactic Union realized, far too late, that their carefully maintained system of government had been completely and utterly infiltrated. The first clue came when the Auran delegation attempted to revise certain legislative loopholes that humans had been exploiting. The proposed amendments were rejected by a human majority vote. Vaylon, clutching his temples, checked the representative list. There were now 12 human diplomats across various committees. 12, he choked. When did we approve 12? Natalie Carter, seated comfortably at the council table, tapped at her tablet. Technically, it's 24, she said. We doubled our numbers last week. Vaylon practically shrieked. How? Natalie smiled. Oh, we just applied. Vaylon looked ready to throw himself into the nearest sun. That should not have worked. There are regulations, vetting processes, checks and balances. Natalie shrugged. You never specified a maximum number of representatives per species, so we sent in some applications. She took a sip of coffee. And by some, I mean about 6,000. Vaylon froze. The approval system processed them all before anyone noticed, she added cheerfully. Vaylon's hands gripped the edge of the table as he tried to steady himself. This is an act of war, he hissed. Oh, no, 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 Natalie said, wagging a finger. See, an act of war requires an official declaration. She gestured toward the growing list of human representatives, some of whom were already leading new initiatives on intergalactic trade agreements. This is just well-executed administrative efficiency. Silence, a deep, horrified silence. Jorlin, who had barely spoken in days, muttered in a broken voice, She filed 6,000 applications. Vaylon inhaled slowly. So what you're saying, he said, voice trembling, is that we now have 24 human diplomats, all with full voting rights. Natalie took another sip of coffee. Yep, Tazek chittered approvingly. Impressive. This is a hostile takeover, Vaylon whispered. And we let it happen, Jorlin added. Natalie beamed. Oh no, you let it happen. We just saw an opportunity. Vaylon slumped back in his chair, hands covering his face. Dear stars. At that precise moment, the Galactic Union's official communication network chimed. An automated message played, New Security Policy Draft uploaded. For review. The system announced, Submitted by Representative Carter of Earth. Vaylon did not move. More notifications followed. New regulations proposed by Earth delegation. Earth Efficiency Report for the Grand Council has been finalized. Intergalactic Banking Restructuring Initiative drafted by Earth.